Hello, everybody, and welcome to Atheist Sunday School, your one-stop shop for everything Atheist Sunday and school. And boy, do we have a show for you today. Today we are covering Hosea chapters 12 through 14. And now, it's time to finish Hosea.
Slow down.
Yeah, isn't that exciting? We're finishing Hosea today.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, I have the King James Version of the Bible.
I have the English Standard Version of the Bible.
We also have the Hebrew Bible, a translation with commentary by Robert Alter.
We have Erdman's commentary on the Bible, and from Hermenia by Hans Walter Wolff, we have his commentary and translation of Hosea.
We also have the Holy Scriptures according to some Jews and the New King James Version of the Bible.
And just in case we need it, we have The Struggle of Yahweh and El for Hosea's Israel by R. Scott Chalmers.
Yep. And these are pretty short chapters.
Yeah, so...
one of them's 14 verses, one of them's 16 verses, and one of them's 9 verses.
Yeah, so we don't really have too much to cover today. This one will be similar to the last one where it was mostly commentary.
Yes.
Yeah.
And if you remember, last time we ended on a verse that in Hebrew manuscripts is in chapter 12.
Yeah, that's right.
Yep.
Which, that's not the only time that's ever happened. That happens occasionally where
it's not the only time.
I know. It happens where the chapter division is just different.
Yep. Because this is the holy and unchanging word of God.
Well, I mean, I don't think that the numbering really does.
The numbering matters. Hosea. This book has changed from the first few chapters a lot.
Yeah, it started off with I guess it started off similarly to other prophets though, right? Like you have first you have some stories about the prophet, something about their life, and then you have like this series of admonitions. Like here's who's good and here's who's bad and here's what's going to happen to all of them. So that's just classic prophet stuff.
Unfortunately, the detail that we get about Hosea is just that his wife was a whore.
It had to be a whore.
Of course.
Apparently.
God demands that Hosea's wife is a whore.
Yeah.
He hardened her heart.
And then she hardened something else.
Yep.
So for this chapter, I'm just gonna introduce it here a little bit for chapter 12. So chapter 12. Wait, hold on. Is this missing? No, it isn't. Okay, sorry. So chapter 12 does not presuppose what has been proclaimed in 11:8 through 11. Now, Ephraim's guilt is expressed by a different way as deception and betrayal of its God, the theme that makes this chapter a charismatic unit. The keyword treachery in verse 1a, found only in chapter 12, occurs again in verse 8 and remains the dominant subject until verse 15. There, Ephraim's bitter provocation and abuse is expressed by the similar sounding word bitterly, and I'm guessing it sounds similar in the Hebrew. In the meantime, the theme of deception is developed with reference to Ephraim's bargaining spirit to Jacob and Gilgal. Thus, the accusation, the accusation will just be, we're going to see a lot of it. It's going to be in verse 1, 2, 4, all throughout the chapter. So the accusation unquestionably predominates the entire chapter. It is intensified by reference to Yahweh's words and deeds, which show Ephraim's own deeds to be all the more false. The difference in Judah's conduct, at least according to the present text, is also indicated in verse 1b. This rather lengthy proof of Israel's guilt, judged in terms of saving history, then leads to the rather tersely formulated threats of Yahweh's judgment, which are stated concretely only in verses 10 and 12. In the decisive sentences that provide the framework, the threats simply declare a general kind of retribution. Furthermore, on the setting a little bit, and of course this is still from Wolf here, if we are correct in assuming that chapter 12 begins a transmission complex distinct from that of chapters 4 through 11, the sayings of this chapter nevertheless could have originated from the same period as some of the other sketches of Hosea's sayings. Verse 1 is reminiscent of 9:7. Verse 2 recalls 7:11 or 11:5. Since Gilead has apparently been captured by Tiglath-Pileser, and Ephraim again swings between Assyria and Egypt, the time is possibly the beginning of Shalmaneser V's reign. In the meantime, a considerable wealth had promoted disloyalty to Yahweh. The sayings collected here were most likely proclaimed near the Judean border in the area of Bethel or Gilgal. And just some additional commentary from Erdman's here on this section.
Yeah.
You know what? I'll hit on that when we get to verse 2.
You know, once we're done with Hosea, there is only one book in the Bible, in the Old Testament, that will take us more than 2 episodes.
Zechariah?
Yes.
Yeah.
Otherwise, the rest of them are going to be like 1 episode or 2 episodes.
Yeah, they're not very long.
Like, I mean, if something has 7 chapters, we can just do 4 and 3.
Yeah.
You know? But yeah, we're in the final stretch now. I mean, we're getting there.
Yeah, we are. Very, very close.
You know, next week we're gonna be doing Joel, all of Joel. It's only 3 chapters long.
Yeah, and we do have commentaries on Joel.
And you know, I've never heard anyone ever talk about the book of Joel. I have no idea what's in it. Like, none at all. Honestly, I don't think I've ever heard a single person say anything about the book of Joel.
I would like to say that every person I've met named Joel was a jerk.
And
there you go.
Obviously, that translates to the Bible here.
I have no prejudice against any other name.
See,
just Joel.
That's how we know that Chris will hate the book of Joel. He's like, you're an asshole, Joel. I already don't like you.
That's going to be how I feel because that's how all Joels have been thus far.
Jason says there's locusts in Joel.
Great.
I like locusts.
Given that it's 3 chapters, I guess that's all that happens in Joel.
There are locusts.
But anyways, why don't I hop into chapter 12? I'll start.
Maybe Joel is a locust. I'm kidding. That's a joke. That's a joke, everyone. Don't take me out of context.
It's like Kafka's Metamorphoses, where he wakes up as a bug.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Just ripping off the book of Joel, guys. Anyways, I'll hop into chapter 12, but I'll start with chapter 11, verse 12, because it's technically part of chapter 12.
Sure.
Okay. Chapter 12, or
Ish.
the end of chapter 11. 12-ish, yes. Ephraim compasseth me about with lies, and the house of Israel with deceit. But Judah yet ruleth with God, and is faithful with the saints.
You know, earlier we had a verse about how Judah was also sinning.
Yes, we did.
Yeah.
And obviously they continue to do so, hence the exile.
Right. So those accused are the inhabitants of the rump state of Ephraim, of course the north, and their official representatives, the members of the house of Israel. They have encompassed their powerful opponent as one surrounds a fortress or encircles his worst enemy. Their weapon is lies and treachery, as is said of Jacob in Genesis 27:35, and repeatedly of the enemy in Lamentations. So who is meant here, Yahweh or the prophet? In Hosea and elsewhere. Great. Here's some Hebrew I don't understand. Can you want to read these Hebrew words here?
I mean, they mean things.
I know they mean things.
It's something like Kohash and Mirima or something.
Okay, for some reason those sound familiar. I don't know, maybe that's me just not knowing Hebrew, where a lot of things just sound familiar.
You know, it would be nice if they wrote a language where you actually know what the vowels are.
Well, that would be nice. Yeah.
You would think over the, at least 3,000 year history of the Bible that they would have developed that in their standard writings, but apparently not.
Well, I mean, yeah, I guess. So either way, those two words concern the neighbor. Only in one instance does the reference concern Yahweh, and that's in Psalm 17:1. Thus, the terminology of this sentence is best understood as a complaint uttered by the deceived and oppressed prophet. This interpretation is supported by the fact that the immediately following verses contain no words spoken by Yahweh in the first person, and that the entire chapter, except for verses 10 and 11, speaks of God in the third person. Of course, Yahweh, who speaks through the prophet, is affected as well.
All right. Ephraim feedeth on wind, and followeth after the east wind. That's bad. He daily increaseth lies and desolation, and they do make a covenant with the Assyrians, and oil is carried into Egypt.
Oh, remember hurting the wind? It's a lot like Ecclesiastes.
Yeah.
It's like, you can't do that. Like, it's wind.
Following after the east wind, obviously that's a bad thing because the east is where invaders come from.
Yeah.
And also horrible desert storms.
Exactly.
The Lord hath also a controversy with Judah, and will punish Jacob according to his ways. According to his doings will he recompense him. He took his brother by the heel in the womb, and by his strength he had power with God.
I do want to point out one quick thing here. So, hopping back to verse 2 there, it was the one where, like, Ephraim herds the winds and all that stuff. Just so we're clear on verses. So as the text now stands, Judah is included in the indictment. This is undoubtedly a later substitution for Israel, for verses 3 and 4 play not on the name Judah, but on Jacob and Israel, with no further mention of Judah. Verse 3 refers to Jacob's stories in Genesis, and in Genesis 25:26 and 27:36, and 12:4 to the strange incident in Genesis 32:28. The later substitution of the name Judah is not the work of a complacent Judean editor, but the reapplication of the message to the southern kingdom at a time when Judah too faced the threat of deportation.
Yeah, so I'm sure
that,
you
that,
remember
that explains why
the Jacob story.
Yes.
Yeah. And we covered that in Jubilees too. Much more detailed in Jubilees.
Yeah, they Jubilees was that was a very interesting take.
Yeah.
On some of those things. Who was it, Rachel, that they made out to be way more of a bitch? Is that what I think that was Jubilees?
I'm pretty sure, yeah.
Yeah. I think it was Rachel.
Yeah. Yea, he had power over the angel and prevailed. He wept and made supplication unto him. He found him in Bethel, and there he spake with us. Oh, Jacob's ladder. Even the Lord God of hosts, the Lord is his memorial. Therefore turn thou to thy God. Keep mercy and judgment, and wait on thy God continually. I don't think that follows from what he just said.
As for you to your God, you shall turn back. Faithfulness and justice keep, and hope for your God always. Well, I think that's kind of like the whole point of quite a lot of the Bible, especially like later things.
Yeah.
Where like they are beginning to realize that like they're still getting destroyed in a lot of ways. So they just have to be hopeful at some point. That's kind of the theology that's presented in a lot of the prophets, and especially in Psalms too. And like a lot of those later all those later laments, it's a lot of, hoping for better things in the future.
Yeah, Eerdmans here has a bit on this. It says, there's been much debate whether the portrayal of Jacob is intended to be negative or positive. Verses 3 through 4 suggest that the portrayal is deliberately ambiguous. Jacob, deceiver and supplanter from birth, is also the one who struggled with the angelic visitant by night in his determination to receive a blessing. It was he, too, whom God encountered and addressed at Bethel. Hosea's account of these ancient traditions is essentially the same as that found in Genesis. The apparent differences arise from the conflation of the incident at Peniel with the closely related story of Jacob's subsequent meeting with Esau when Jacob wept and sought his favor. The conflation of the two incidents is probably due to the fact that both refer to the face of God. Thus, 4 separate incidents are alluded to briefly for an audience who knew intimately the details of these sacred traditions. The ambivalent portrayal of Jacob, their eponymous ancestor, is significant for the nation, guilty themselves of deceit, yet with the hope for the future grounded in their relationship with God. The Jacob traditions to which Hosea referred encompass a considerable period in Jacob's life. Hence the exhortation to Israel in verse 6 to wait patiently for God, acclaimed here by his solemn and exalted title, the Lord God of hosts. Anyways, I'm already on verse 7. He is a merchant. The balance of deceit are in his hand. He loveth to oppress.
So the translation here is a little bit different, but I think that it makes more sense in altars. Mm-hmm. A huckster in whose hand are cheating scales, loving to exploit. I do think that makes more sense here.
Yeah. And Ephraim said, Yet I am become rich. I have found me out substance. In all my labors they shall find none iniquity in me that were sin. And I that am the Lord thy God from the land of Egypt will yet make thee to dwell in tabernacles, as in the days of the solemn feast. I have also spoken by the prophets, and I have multiplied visions, and used similitudes by the ministry of the prophets. Is there iniquity in Gilead? Surely they are vanity. They sacrifice bullocks in Gilgal. Yea, their altars are as heaps in the furrows of the fields. How many altars does it take to make a heap?
It's 3 piles.
What? Why do you ask these questions?
And Jacob fled into the country of Syria. And Israel served for a wife, and for a wife he kept sheep. And by a prophet the Lord brought Israel out of Egypt, and by a prophet was he preserved. Ephraim provoked him to anger most bitterly. Therefore shall he leave his blood upon him, and his reproach shall his Lord return unto him. And that's the end of chapter 12. Interesting, when they start using the name Israel, there's like kind of a double entendre there, right? Where he is talking about Israel, the nation.
Yeah.
And it calls back, when they refer to Egypt, it calls back to the Exodus story slightly, but they're doing it through the lens of Jacob's story here, right? Which is an interesting little bit.
Yeah, it is. It seems, so they're talking about, first they have the distinction between Ephraim and Judah. Mm-hmm. And then they start talking about Israel, but it does seem like they're talking mostly about the people. Mm-hmm. So it seems like that's the tonal shift there.
So there's a little bit of commentary on this parallel here. At first, there seems little connection between these verses 10 through 14. The opening words, however, suggest that the thought centers on the prophets, their role, and the nation's lack of response. 12:10 and 13 spell out 2 aspects of a prophet's task: to be a messenger of God's judgment and the protector of the nation. Beginning with the judgmental role of the prophets, Hosea's thought moves to the sins of the nation. The objection to sacrifice at Gilgal may reflect a later standpoint when sacrifice was centered on the Jerusalem temple. He then takes a broad sweep of history from Jacob to Moses and to the contemporary situation. The brief allusion of verse 12 encompasses the ambivalence of Jacob's character. Having tricked his father Isaac, he fled for his life to a foreign land, where he himself was tricked and served long and loyally for Rachel, his chosen wife. Jacob guarded sheep, Genesis 30:31, and by Moses, Israel was guarded. The connection between 12:12 and 13 consists not only in the repetition of guarded, but also in the story of Israel's history, stretching from Jacob's flight to a foreign land, Aram, to Israel's deliverance from a foreign land, Egypt. As in verses 3 through 4, the very familiarity of the traditions is reflected in the brevity of the allusions. Yet after these centuries of history in which God has been at work, Jacob's descendants have mistreated his messengers, the prophets, hence the judgment threatened in verse 14.
Yeah, these are that's pretty much the same conclusion that is reached by both Alter and Wolf here. Just, I mean, Wolf puts it in way more words than Alter puts it in less, but those are essentially the same conclusions.
So that is the end of chapter 12. If you're enjoying the stream so far, give us a like, talk in the chat, comment if the chat is no longer live, and share it with your friends, family, neighbors, ancestors.
Oh yeah, your ancestors are gonna love this one. I mean,
bring them back just for this.
Yeah, they're really gonna get a kick out of it, don't you think?
Yep.
Yeah. So let's see. Chapter 13 is what we're starting with.
Let me introduce this.
Yeah, looks like we're getting more talk about a frame here.
So Eerdman says, the theme throughout this most horrific of chapters is sin and its consequences. It begins with an allusion to Ephraim's past guilt and its penalty.
I bet it's nothing like Deuteronomy 28. That was horrific to read. That was a wild ride.
It ends with the contemporary sin of Samaria, Ephraim's capital city, and its dire consequences in the future. Now, Wolf, in the Hermenia commentary, talks about the setting here. He says that the scene is only understood if King Hoshea ben Elah had already been imprisoned by the Assyrians. The seldom mentioned city of Samaria and the unique announcement of its inhabitants' death points to the same period when the siege of the capital was approaching, or had already begun. Accordingly, the sayings from this scene are very probably proclaimed around the year 724. In point of fact, in none of the preceding scenes had the prophet so powerfully spoken of Ephraim's irrepressible destruction.
Yeah, so, I mean, throughout the entire book of Hosea, we rarely get allusions to something like the exile. Like, the only thing that could be interpreted that way would be, like, when they admonish Judah. And because of that, it's clear this is an older text. Like, this and Amos, I think, are, like, the two oldest books of the Bible. Because they make a lot more allusions to the things that were going on in their time, like the Assyrians. They were less concerned with Babylon. So, all right, let's hop into chapter 13, shall we?
Yes.
When Ephraim spoke, there was trembling. He was exalted in Israel, but he incurred guilt through Baal and died.
So, yeah, it's because of their idolatry.
Yeah. And now they sin more and more and make for themselves metal images, idols, skillfully made of their silver, all of them the work of craftsmen. It is said of them, those who offer human sacrifice kiss calves.
Yeah, so Eerdmans points out The exact nature of the questionable cult practices referred to in verse 2b is unclear. The NRSV indicates that Jeroboam I offered sacrifice to idols and kissed the calf images set up at Dan and Bethel. For a similar practice, see 1 Kings 19:18. The natural meaning of the difficult Hebrew, however, hints at an altogether more sinister practice, that of human sacrifice. See the REB and the NIV. Against this, however, is the unlikelihood that the prophet would dismiss so serious an infringement of Yahweh's will in this summary fashion. Now, Alter does translate this as sacrifices of man. He says this is an opaque phrase. It could possibly mean human sacrifices, but there are no indications elsewhere that a frame practiced human sacrifice.
Wasn't there a like a polemic against Molech, right?
Yes, constantly.
About human sacrifice, I mean.
Yes, that's Moloch.
Constantly.
Yeah.
That's what Moloch means.
Yeah, so it's I don't know. Once we get to verse
What was that aside?
What?
Nothing.
Once we get to verse 9, I am going to have some commentary from Chalmers. So we get through the section. So we have these possibly human sacrifices or just sacrifices by humans. Therefore, they shall be like the morning mist or like the dew that goes early away, like the chaff that swirls from the threshing floor, or like smoke from a window. They're going to dissipate. That's some good Colette stuff, right? Mere breath, I think was the word that they used. But I am the Lord your God from the land of Egypt. You know no God but me, and besides me there is no Savior. It was I who knew you in the wilderness, in the land of drought. But when they had grazed, they became full. They were filled, and their heart was lifted up. Therefore they forgot me.
So they're talking about the desert, the manna in the desert, the exodus from Egypt.
Yeah. And once they felt like they were satisfied, they just stopped doing the things, all the faithful things. So I am to them like a lion, like a leopard. I will lurk beside the way. I will fall upon them like a bear robbed of her cubs. I will tear open their breast, and there I will devour them like a lion, as a wild beast would rip them open.
So here the poem uses one of the 5 biblical terms for lion, not in the same word as in verse 7. So they use multiple different terms throughout this chapter to say lion.
All right, so this next verse that I'm going to read here, there are a good bit of textual difficulties, which, yes, Wolf does cover, so I'm just going to read it. So you can cover the textual difficulties, and then I'm going to get into some commentary here from Chalmers. So, he destroys you, O Israel, for you are against me, against your helper. Now, that's one translation. So I want you to take note of that. He destroys you, O Israel, for you are against me, against your helper. And the translation used by Chalmers is, I will destroy you, O Israel, who will help you?
Now, what verse is this?
That's verse 9.
Verse 9.
Yeah.
So Wolf translates it as, I will destroy you, O Israel, who will help you.
Okay.
And
yeah, that's the translation that's used here. In fact, he cites Wolf pages 220 through 21, probably about the textual difficulties.
It says, Masoretic, for in me, in your help, or indeed with me, with your help, he destroys you, remains obscure. According to the Greek text, and I guess one of the Syriac ones, me This actually has the vowels. Okay. Mi ve'oz recha should probably be read. Masoretic becomes explicable if we assume that now it doesn't have the vowels. Zorech developed from vi az recha as a result of ditography. Then ki might introduce a noun clause, which is the subject of another clause. It has led to your destruction, O Israel, that your help was in me.
Yeah, so Anderson and Friedman note that in the surrounding text, Yahweh speaks in the first person. Both Wolf and Anderson and Friedman follow the Syriac attestation of, I'm guessing it's what you just read there. He destroys you. So the Septuagint and the Vulgate both interpret the word nominally, who will help you in your destruction. And verse 9b is equally obscure. It literally translates, for in me, in your help. Wolf follows the Septuagint and Syriac and suggests who will help you. All right, so that's the textual commentary there.
For verse 9.
Yeah. So on the section 13, 2 through 9. So we have Hosea's final comments on the issue of identity of the God who has been with Israel since Israel was a child, as discussed in chapter 1. The molten image in 13:2 is repeatedly used in reference to the El cult of Jeroboam. It is not as clear, however, how to identify the idols of their silver according to a likeness. In chapter 1, we saw repeatedly the singular and the plural form of these cultic items. Exodus 32:4 and 8 refers to a single molten image that was then described as plural gods. Yep, and then in 2 Kings as well. And yeah, also the they made for themselves a molten image, 2 calves. Anderson and Friedman venture that the reference to a singular in 13:2, all of it, the work of engravers, suggests that one particular idol is meant, and that, as elsewhere in Hosea, the plural idols does not describe the multiplicity of images, but is the imitation of Elohim to describe the rival god, Baal. By the same token, the plural calves in verse 2 refers to the image of Baal as a young bull. Concerning the word that's used there, I guess, whatever the Hebrew word is, they note that it is only found in the plural in the Old Testament, and that, like other plurals in Hosea, Be'alim, Me'ahabim, and Agalot, which refer to heathen deities, the word imitates Elohim, God, and may mean just one pagan god, namely Baal. Which would be fair because at some point in time, it while El was still used to just refer to singular God, Elohim did just kind of become like another name for God. It just became associated with that one singular one. Mm-hmm. Clearly, as this chapter is attempting to point out, the idol in question may very well be El, not Baal. The phrase in 13:2 is yet another extremely difficult text in Hosea. Wolf translates the phrase as, they say to themselves, those who sacrifice men kiss calves, presupposing that what is being described here is the quote, inroads of a Canaanite sexual rite into Israel in which young virgins offered themselves to the divinity and expected fertility in return. Similarly, Anderson and Friedman translate the phrase, those who sacrifice people speak to them. They kiss the calves, suggesting that here the calves receive religious homage and human sacrifices offered to a casting in the shape of a calf. However, human sacrifice is nowhere else explicitly mentioned in Hosea, and in light of my description of chapters 11 through 13, the association of this text with a Baalistic cult of sex or death seems highly unlikely. In light of the discussion above describing the manner in which Hosea quotes the liturgy practiced at Bethel, I would propose a similar solution for 13:2. Mackintosh refers to Kimchi, who interpreted the phrase to mean the sacrifices of men. So yeah, in a different what's the word I'm looking for? A different person, I guess. I don't know, different tense.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Mackintosh interprets the same phrase in the superlative sense, translating the entire phrase, of them they say true worshippers kiss calves. Mackintosh notes that this sin refers to the paradigmatic sin of the first king of the independent nation, although he agrees with Wolff that the singular noun probably does not refer to a certain image, but rather to the off-occurring design of small bronze statuettes overlaid with silver. Mackintosh's translation fits well, however, into the tone of mockery we have seen in Hosea's treatment of the Bethel liturgy. He writes, quote, "For Hosea, the words are no doubt heavily ironic, and following his characterization of the whole enterprise as merely the work of craftsmen intended to emphasize its folly. Wolff alludes to this ironic understanding of the text, although his translation does not reflect it. Quote, also new is the cultic precept, probably cited with irony. Those who sacrifice men should kiss calves. In light of this discussion, I would suggest that rather than the traditional connection between this text and the Baal cult, the reference to kissing calves is rather meant simply to show the almost comical nature of the Bull El cult at Bethel. Now, I don't know about his... I'm not completely convinced about the association, or I should say the direct association of El, because Baal did kind of take over pretty much all the stuff from El eventually. So, like, I'm not 100% sold on that one, but just the translation of that specific verse
is difficult.
Yeah, and it could mean like a whole ton of things
depending on what source you're using.
Well, yeah.
So I think it's noteworthy that book and Eerdmans both use this as a reference. Apparently, people really like Wolff when it comes to Hosea.
Yeah, and I think one of the next commentaries we'll be using is also from him.
Cool.
Yeah, it's not from Hermenia, I don't think, but it's still from Wolff, so
better be. So talk about this next verse because I have some commentary on it.
Okay. Where now is your king to save you in all your cities? Where are all your rulers, those of whom you said, give me a king and princes?
So, as before, Hosea follows the line of the prophet Samuel in viewing the popular demand for a king as a presumptuous mistake.
Yeah.
Now, here in Wolff, it says, apparently Israel has just lost her previous hope. Shalmaneser V has taken Hoshea ben Elah prisoner, along with other important political and military leaders. By sheer persistence, Israel had persuaded Yahweh to give her a king. It seems that the group of prophets and Levites gathered around Hosea was already acquainted with that tradition, later taken up into the Deuteronomistic history, which told how kingship was wrested from Yahweh. In this verse, it becomes quite plain that the roots of Hosea's criticisms of kingship go deeper than the present grievances. Almost like the Baal cult, kingship from the outset was in opposition to Yahweh's lordship. Before Hosea's time, such opposition is attested only in 1 Samuel 10:27 and Jotham's fable, recorded in Jubilees 9.
And this next verse is kind of weird, so hopefully there is some commentary on it.
Very brief commentary.
Yeah, so I gave you a king in my anger, and I took him away in my wrath. So he seems like he's angry both times.
Yeah.
Which is why that's weird to me.
In verse 11, it indicates Hosea's attitude to the palace Indicates rather Hosea's attitude to the palace intrigues, which marred the later years of the northern kingdom. The applied allusion to 1 Samuel 8 may be intended as a reminder that God still holds the initiative in the rise and fall of human monarchs. Now, Wolf only says, in Hosea's view, kingship was only granted to Israel in Yahweh's wrath. The imperfect verbs refer to all the kings from Saul to Hoshea ben Elah, whom Yahweh in his wrath has just stripped of his royal office.
So he was angry when he gave them the king, and then he was angry when he took him away? I don't know. That still is...
Well, he was mad.
Mad for different reasons.
It's explicable, but it doesn't have to be rational.
Sure. It's I guess he was just mad for different reasons each time, I guess. Would be the only reason I can think of. Either way, the iniquity of Ephraim is bound up. His sin is kept in store. The pangs of childbirth come for him, but he is an unwise son. For at the right time, he does not present himself at the opening of the womb.
So, he does not present himself at the opening of the womb. Was that verse 13 for you?
Yes.
Okay. Alter translates this as...
Wait, so he's not born when he should be born?
For now he shall not last on the birth stool for children. That's what Alter says.
Okay.
Now, the birth pangs imagery is really just all that.
The pain, yeah.
All Wolf talks about here. So it's not really anything worth noting, but it is what it is. I mean...
Okay, what a strange verse. All right.
Yeah.
Shall I ransom them from the power of Sheol? Shall I redeem them from death?
So, why don't you finish this verse?
Okay. Oh, death, where are your plagues? Oh, Sheol, where is your sting? Compassion is hidden from my eyes.
So, Alter says, some interpreters construe this from Sheol shall I ransom them, from death shall I redeem them, as a positive declaration by God, that he will ransom Ephraim from death. But this makes no sense in light of the language of utter devastation deployed in the next verse, so it's best to understand it as a rhetorical question with the implied answer no. Now, for the second part of the verse, it says, where are your words, O death? Now, some critics revocalize devareka, your words, as devreka, your pestilence, yielding a neater parallelism with the second verset. As in verse 10, a he at the beginning of each of the two versets here is amended to aya. If, as this translation assumes, the preceding line of poetry comprises two rhetorical questions, then the meaning of the two questions here is, where is your scourge, death? Bring it to bear on these miscreants. For what Wolf says about this verse, he says, verse 14 presents a different metaphor. Perhaps the indictment in verse 13 was countered with the objection that Yahweh could act as Israel's true midwife, since he can command the powers of Sheol and death. Or like verse 4:16b, verse 14a may call into question another response to Hosea from the audience. They possibly quoted a cultic hymn which was influenced by Canaanite thought and mythology. The word to redeem does not otherwise occur in Hosea's vocabulary. To ransom is found only again in 7:13b in a similar rhetorical question.
Yeah, but the idea from saving from death, although not talking about about Hosea here specifically, the idea of saving them from Sheol, or the grave, or however you want to translate it, it pops up a decent amount in biblical texts.
Yes, it does. But it's meant here to
And then
parallel
then
with the birth imagery that precedes it.
Okay.
So it's like bookends, right?
So shall I continue to verse 15?
Yeah, why don't you finish this chapter?
Okay. Though he may flourish among his brothers, the east wind, the wind of the Lord, shall come, rising from the wilderness, and his foundation shall dry up, his spring shall be parched. It shall strip his treasury of every precious thing. Samaria shall bear her guilt, because she has rebelled against her God. They shall fall by the sword. Their little ones shall be dashed in pieces, and their pregnant women ripped open. That we've seen that before.
Yes, we've seen that in the Psalms.
Yeah.
It is quite brutal.
It is pretty brutal, yeah.
However, that verse that you just read is also chapter 14, verse 1 in Hebrew manuscripts.
Yes, I see that.
So
I got a note on it.
Yeah. I mean, there's not much to say about it. It's like, horrific child murder imagery. That's that. But do you hear something?
I think I do hear something. It's really weird.
Whoa!
Behold, I am your Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, and I want to let all you heathens and sinners know that I support this wonderful episode of Atheist Sunday School. Lawrence and Reuben try their very best to bring you the true glory of the Bible, and they need your help. They have provided links to their Patreon page and other social media just for you. Once again, my name is Jesus Christ, and this is Milwaukee Atheists. The Lord is with them. God bless.
Wow, that was incredible. Once again, Jesus has stopped by to, tell us how much he likes us for some reason. Thanks, Jesus.
Just you.
Oh, just me. All right.
Yeah, this time just for you.
Well, I don't know, because he seems to like Reuben a lot. Because
say that
Reuben
does in the stream, but he's never here when Jesus is around. So I don't know.
Well, the thing is, Jesus is taking him
That's
away.
what you would have been told.
That's
a big.
That's
conspiracy.
what I witness it.
It's a huge conspiracy.
I witness it. I just hope the chat believes me.
Yeah.
So let's talk about this next chapter here. So this great announcement of salvation contains no clear criteria on which to base its date, but it is probably best understood at the time when the end of the northern kingdom was in view. The fall is as good as complete, since it has now become apparent that neither Assyria nor the Canaanite cult can help Israel. Of course, we got that before. They had all this great stuff, but then the Lord came out swinging, and now they have nothing. That was in the last two verses there. Oh my God.
Whoa, I was just, spirited away to Godland.
How was it?
Well, he told me that Samaria is going to become desolate because she's rebelled against her God.
Oh, okay.
And their infants are going to be dashed in pieces, and their woman with child will be ripped up.
Give me something new. I've heard that one before.
Yeah.
All right. Anyways, so the expression in verse 9, what has Ephraim any more to do with idols, especially indicates with the word more that a turning point has been reached, which puts the entire past into question. Therefore, it is conceivably the time of Shalmaneser the fifth, when Samaria's end was near. There's some context for you.
Yes. So without further ado, let's get into these last 9 verses of Hosea.
Yeah.
O Israel, return unto the Lord thy God, for thou hast fallen by thine iniquity. Take with you words, and turn to the Lord. Say unto him, take away all iniquity, and receive us graciously, so we will render the calves of our lips.
So, I mean, it's not like too different, but take words with you. This slightly odd formulation probably conveys the idea that words are to be vehicles of repentance, not animal sacrifices or grain offerings, but words spoken from the heart.
Mm-hmm. Ashur shall not save us. We will not ride upon horses, neither will we say any more to the works of our hands, ye are our gods, for in thee the fatherless find mercy. So talk about Ashur.
So it's just Assyria. Mm-hmm. Because that's the translation that's used here. Yeah, so it's Assyria will not rescue us. On horses we shall not ride. So yeah, as in the ancient Yahweh cult, the idols are rejected. In the 8th century, the idols took on new forms. The great foreign power Assyria, from whom help was erroneously expected again and again. There is Israel's own military strength, her horses, which refer to her chariot corps. We have a whole video on that one.
Yeah, and if you recall, the horses are actually like a major part of the military strategy that Israel has used. Whenever they talk about the battles that they do, they talk about these like flanking maneuvers that they use, where they travel around and then like come in from multiple sides.
Well, but the thing is, horses aren't really used that often in Israel military things.
One would presume that if they're trying to surround an army that uses iron chariots led by horses, that they would themselves use a cavalry to do so.
Like you would think, but it's not like very often explicit.
It might not be explicit, but I don't see how they would literally have the speed to do such a thing.
Power God.
Oh yeah. Okay.
They ran real fast.
And check it out, Landon's here.
Yeah, Landon, how you doing, buddy? Glad that you're here.
Yeah. So let me continue on here. I will heal.
I did have a couple.
Oh yeah.
Go on. So they're talking about the strength of Israel's horses, which refer to her chariot corps, the essence of her martial forces, the calf image of the Baal cult, which, though the work of our hands, was worshipped as our God in 8:6. So that's the third one. We're still talking about the different idol forms, I guess.
So one person asked, didn't they breed horses at Megiddo?
Did they?
Well, they must breed horses somewhere.
Well, yeah, but I mean, I'm not sure about like exact like places on that.
Yeah, I remember Megiddo.
I mean, yeah, Megiddo pops up quite a few times. It was a pretty big city. I don't remember that though.
No,
it might have been.
That.
It might have been. There are a few notes here, so maybe there's something on that. Okay, so yeah, the chariot corps that he refers to does not mean cavalry. Apparently, he specifies that. Okay, so there are a few references here. Okay, so I think this is referring to when they were getting horses from Egypt. That was like the big thing.
Oh, yeah.
That they were getting horses from Egypt, but they shouldn't have been.
Yeah. Obviously this is a continuation of what was written in chapter 13. So the setting would remain the same.
Yeah, around the same time, yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways, let's see. In the solemn disavowal of the gods she presently worships, Israel renews her original confession of faith in Yahweh as her only Savior, the comforter of the helpless. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there you go.
I will heal their backsliding. I will love them freely, for mine anger is turned away from him. I will be as the dew unto Israel. He shall grow as the lily, and cast forth his roots as Lebanon. His branches shall spread, and his beauty shall be as the olive tree, and his smell as Lebanon. They that dwell under his shadow shall return. They shall revive as the corn, and grow as the vine. The scent thereof shall be as the wine of Lebanon. Ephraim shall say, what have I to do any more with idols? I have heard him and observed him. I am like a green fir tree. From me is thy fruit found. So there's a lot of these plant metaphors that pop up. Obviously,
I mean, we've seen like cedars of Lebanon plenty of times. Mm-hmm. That comes up. That was the wood that you wanted. You were going to build something with wood. You got to use the cedars of Lebanon because those are pretty important.
Yeah, and the point of this is to be like, oh, they'll be prosperous if they follow God. Things will be good. They'll smell like the wine of Lebanon.
Yeah, apparently.
Yeah.
Which I don't know if. How often do we hear about the wine of Lebanon?
I don't think we hear about it that often.
No, not very often at all. So what was that? That was verse 8, looks like?
Yeah, well, here it's verse 7, but in other manuscripts it would be verse 8.
Okay. I'm going to see if there is something about the wine of Lebanon. That is currently what I'm checking for, because we have, the cedars of Lebanon, that's one thing.
Yeah.
And we have stuff that just, makes perfect sense, like
presumably if the
like
trees
the vine
that grow in Lebanon are of high quality, then the soil that's used to plant grapevines would also be good quality, right?
Yeah, you'd think.
Different plants.
Yeah. I mean, with wine, you have to pay attention to a bunch of shit. It's like, oh, well, what's the clay makeup within the soil in this area? That affects the flavor.
So I guess it makes sense there because
This is the only reference to wine of Lebanon in the Bible.
All right. Makes sense why I've never seen it before. So there is the only commentary on here is that it is now famous for its wine. So they can't really, I don't know. I think it probably just has to do with the plant imagery, mm-hmm. right? Like you have this,
like it's not only that which is produced by the ground, but also that which is cultivated from what is produced in the ground.
Yeah. So it's not just like the trees of Lebanon that you would want. You have like reference here to the grains and like the vine, they shall blossom. So I guess playing off that, his fame is like Lebanon wine.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of playing off of that garden imagery.
Yeah. Last verse. Who is wise, and he shall understand these things, prudent, and he shall know them. For the ways of the Lord are right, and the just shall walk in them, but the transgressors shall fall therein. And that is the end of the book of Hosea.
Yeah, there is one note here. This is on verse 9, though. So the God of Israel provides her with more than his word and his attestation. In the last I am saying in Hosea, the prophet declares in a final bold metaphor that Yahweh himself is the gift of salvation to his people. He's described as a luxuriant cypress or as a Phoenician juniper. So the word that's used emphasizes the full, abundant foliage of the tree, which was regarded as the archetype of ever-enduring existence. So I guess they used that. They used the grapevine imagery, or I guess, the wine imagery, the vine imagery, all that garden stuff and the tree as well to be about prosperity and endurance, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it seems like they were using there.
So, final thoughts on Hosea.
It started off pretty entertaining. And I think not that the rest of it was like bad or anything, but I do think that because we've seen so many
you don't need that.
Yeah, that's true. You're right. Because we've seen so much imagery that's a lot like it, because we've seen so many other prophets be like that, so many lamentations that are like that. It's I don't know if what the word you'd want to put on that is, but we've seen it a lot. It's not novel at this point, I guess.
It's generic.
Yeah. After reading everything else, like if we read it on its own initially, it probably wouldn't have been, right?
Yeah.
Next time we're gonna read this thing in chronological order.
That's not agreed upon.
No, it is not.
Yep. So we're not gonna read it in
Also,
an agreed upon order.
Multiple books take place at roughly the same time.
Yeah. So good
We're
luck
gonna
with
read
that.
those simultaneously.
And there's stuff that
we'll just talk at the same time, like now. It'll be great.
there's also stuff that we have a lot of issues dating. We
Yeah.
just don't know. And like, where would we put Job? Let's.
Well, obviously we'd do it first. No. So, the Book of Hosea. It starts off with this kind of narrative, which is strong, right? About his wife and the parallel between Yahweh's figurative marriage with Israel.
Yeah.
Right. And then it just kind of drops that.
Yep.
And halfway through, not even halfway through, it switches into like, just a grab bag of prophecies that all center around Israel falling to Assyria.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Essentially.
And I guess my criticism of Hosea is that it's not a very cohesive book, right? Like, it doesn't feel like the narrative fits together well between those two different sections.
Yeah. That's kind of like how a lot of prophets have it, right?
Yeah.
Like you have some details about their life, which often has like some parallel to the history of Israel, right? Only the important details, and then it goes on to just have a whole bunch of admonitions and lamentations and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So it is just of the same cloth as pretty much every other prophet.
I hate to say it, but the Bible is getting really repetitive. Like,
Well, it's almost done with this particular repetition. It'll get to the next repetition later.
we're about to do Joel, the whole book of Joel next week.
That's true.
And I don't know what's in Joel because all I've heard about is that it has locusts. But then we have...
You know what?
Yeah. Then we have Amos, then Obadiah, Jonah, Micah, Nahum, Habakkuk, and Zephaniah, Haggai, Zechariah.
Yeah, we have a lot of short ones in Zechariah, basically.
And Malachi. And then we're done with the Old Testament. And I hope that Joel through Malachi are not just repetitive BS. That is
where we get the same kind of format.
Same format, same imagery.
Same wife problems.
Yeah, the same language popping up over and over again.
Who was it? Was it Jeremiah's wife that we got nothing about?
It was Ezekiel's wife.
It was Ezekiel's wife that got a sentence?
Acknowledged her existence when she died.
That was Ezekiel's wife?
Yeah.
Okay.
She didn't even get brought up until she died.
Yeah.
But like
gotta do her dirty like that.
With books like Ezekiel or Daniel, right? There's tons of original stuff that, well, I don't know how original it is.
Right.
But for the Bible original, where...
But even Ezekiel had the same kind of issue. His introductory story was just way more exciting than everything else.
And Daniel had the opposite issue where his introductory story was whatever, right? Wasn't it? No, his was good
No,
too at the beginning.
Daniel's is fine, yeah, but you have to remember that Daniel is a different text and is a different kind of text entirely.
Well, if you include Susanna at the beginning of Daniel.
Oh, right. If you include Susanna, then it's all different.
Yeah.
Then it's
yeah.
That becomes a story that I don't really feel like reading on YouTube again.
Yeah. Well, there's only so many times and so many ways that you can say Israel or Judah have sinned and they'll pay for their transgressions. Turn back to God because he's going to make things better.
Yep.
And then Israel or Judah did not heed the warning. Oh, right? Because that's like what we're getting with a lot of these prophets. And it's just so repetitive. Like,
you ever play the first Assassin's Creed?
No.
I don't even remember.
Oh, man. It's climb a thing, look at everybody, go find the guy, kill the guy, climb a thing. That's the game. They got better and worse at the same time, but like some things just stick to a formula, guys, and whatever works. That's classic Bible.
I guess whatever works, right? Like there, I'm sure that these were useful in their own right, but for whatever purpose they were meant to serve, I'm sure they were useful. But
no, I imagine that originally these would all be written on scrolls, right? And I imagine that when they're written on scrolls and they're not presented in a specific order, and you can just kind of like rummage around and, I guess I'll read the book of Hosea today, right? That would be a lot better of a reading than how it's presented in modern Bibles, where everything's in a defined order, right? Because then you have a little bit to break up the super repetitive stuff.
Yeah,
right?
Although I would say that I don't believe people are usually encouraged to read it from page 1. They read
I never
Genesis.
heard most of this stuff when I was subjected to sermon as a child growing up. None of this was what they talked about. They'd have some sort of moral. They'd read a story usually about Jesus, and then it'd be over. There was nothing about this.
Yeah, but like I would say that like a lot of the time, at least from the perspective of the order of the books, a lot of the time it just doesn't matter, and I don't think that Christians usually read it like that.
Yeah,
that may be the case, but for anyone who picks up the book and intends to read it as you read a book, it just gets so repetitive after a certain point.
It does, yeah.
I feel
Although you have to remember it's a compilation
right
of books, yeah.
Yeah. But it's like,
it'd be like if there were remixes in the compilation video you sent me or something. You show me some good music, and then you show me the list it came from, and the list includes a bunch of remixes that are pretty much the same song, really. You'd be disappointed. You'd be like, well, like, I like these first 4 or 5 times I heard this, but, man, I've heard this enough.
Right. It's like, you ever listen to a music playlist on shuffle? And then it's like, all right.
Real shuffle.
I'm listening to Wagon Wheel, and then up next it's Wagon Wheel. And then up next it's, I guess I have like, War Pigs. And then up next it's Wagon Wheel, but it's a different
it's a cover band.
A cover of Wagon Wheel, right?
And to Jason's point, I think that as far as the reading population, then the literate population, I would say that like they would read something like Hosea in its entirety, right? But like they didn't have it like compiled like this, and I think we're talking about the compiling of these texts as the Bible, more than like individual books of the Bible. Thank you.
Well, all right.
That was bugging me. Anyways, yeah, that's my thoughts on Hosea. Join us next week when we talk about the entirety of the book of Joel.
Yeah, Joel.
Yep. And
we'll see how it goes.
If you want to support the show, check us out on Patreon, where you can donate. You can get all sorts of rewards. You can see our written video scripts.
You can get shirts. You can be on the show like Landon. You could let's see what he's paying this time. Good old He Is Risen.
Yep.
Shirt coming up. in the chat if you don't feel like taking your chances by becoming a patron.
You can just hop on to Teespring and grab yourself one of those T-shirts.
Yeah, absolutely.
And otherwise, you could buy us books through our Amazon wish list. On Amazon, you can find that, and then you can send us books, and we'll read them.
And they can be on this table.
And we'll read them either way.
We will, just in a different way.
And you can also send us money on here, just straight up.
Yeah, you could.
We have one person who's been doing that at the end of the shows.
I see what you're doing there, buddy. there's Chris calling out someone to give us money. Is that what you're doing, Chris?
Tomic, please help.
Tomic, give us $5.
Oh my God, Jesus Christ, guys!
You've got a question. We want to answer it, man.
Guys, holy shit.
He's just been doing it so often.
I know, but still, you can't just this guy do your thing again.
I'm not asking him to do anything. I'm just saying.
That's exactly what it sounds like.
Well, I'm saying mostly thank you. He's given us so far.
Yes, thank you. Just leave it at thank you.
Freaking $5, Tommy. Thank you.
Just leave it at thank you.
And we'll accept more.
Oh my God.
But also, Facebook, Twitter, you can check us out on there. They're not super active, but they're there.
They're there. Yeah, we can post we post some stuff sometimes. Let's see.
Are you working on any other videos?
Yeah, I'm slowly working my way through the Suffering Servant video. There's a lot of material to cover.
Mm-hmm.
There's just a lot. And I mean, I think it'll be a good video if I can if I can structure it in a way that is easy to follow. Because I'll be honest, the amount of interpretations about the suffering servant, and not just the amount, but the arguments in favor of different views, it definitely can get confusing. So I'm just, I have to read all the books, take all the notes, read over all my notes, restructure it, and then reread sections, and then officially write the script.
Yeah.
So it's a process.
Well, guys, just 26 more pages to go in the KJV, and we will be done with the Old Testament.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it'll and then we can read the same story 4 times.
Yeah. You know how many pages of the KJV we've read so far?
A lot.
616.
That's a good amount. That's a good amount of pages.
Yeah, it
Man,
is.
that's crazy.
Yeah, comparatively, those last 26 pages,
Nothing.
But then we had to read the New Testament.
Which isn't that long.
No, it's not that long. Unfortunately,
A year.
Alter never wrote a commentary on the New Testament, but we do have the Jewish annotated New Testament,
Yeah.
which should be something.
Considering the authors, I think it'll be pretty good.
Also, my father's pastor offered to send me all of his notes. So there's probably at least something that talks about the Old Testament prophecies as applied to Jesus or something. In there.
Oh, yeah, and I can... there's actually a good book on that. It's called Scripting Jesus by L. Michael White.
Oh.
Yeah. And it's mostly about, how the New Testament authors have used Old Testament prophecies.
Well, I think that's about everything.
Yeah, I would say so. So thank you, everyone, for joining us.
And we will see you on Friday.
Friday.
Friday
That's
for
the
Second
thing.
Enoch.
And
the true ending.
the actual ending.
The true final
see
boss
you
of Second
on
Enoch.
Friday.
Yep, see you there.